freaked out for a minute or two, probably hyperventilated. And then I realized I had to just calm down and get my shit together and figure it out because I had nobody but myself to depend on to solve this problem.
Hello, my atypical daydreamers. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Valerie Warren. She's a lover of all things China, or Sinophile. I had to look that one up. Once upon a time, she lived in Taiwan to learn Mandarin Chinese. And on one of her weekend excursions to Thailand, she found out just how tough Murphy's Law can be.
I had gotten my bachelor's degree in East Asian studies, specifically Chinese studies. So after I graduated, I bought a one-way ticket to Taipei to further my studies in Mandarin Chinese at the Mandarin Training Center at National Taiwan Normal University in Taipei. It's considered the most respected place to study Mandarin if you're a foreigner. So every 6 months as a student in Taiwan, you still have to take a visa trip. You have to leave Taiwan. Sometimes you go to Hong Kong. A lot of people would go to Vietnam or the Philippines, but most of us would go to Thailand. It was the cheapest flight you could get, but also go somewhere fun and interesting. So you could fly from Taipei to Bangkok. You could go to the beach while you dropped your passport off at, I want to say the Taiwan Embassy, but it was actually called the Taiwan Economic and Cultural Affairs Office because technically they're not allowed to be called an embassy because of China. But I'm still going to call it a Taiwan Embassy just so, anyway, it's easier. This was my second visa run from Taipei to Bangkok. I booked a ticket so that I arrived in Bangkok on a Tuesday and I was flying out on Sunday. On Wednesday, I took my passport to the Taiwan Embassy to drop it off, and it takes them about 48 hours to process a visa, knowing that by dropping it off on Wednesday, I'd be able to pick it up on Friday. The problem is, on the way from the Taiwan Embassy back to Khao San Road, which is sort of a backpacker hostel area in Bangkok, I was in a taxi and getting out of the taxi, paying for it, I had a small purse with me, and in it was all my money, my return plane ticket. This was back in 1993, so everything was paper plane tickets. So it was folded up. All of that was in this small purse, and I had set it down in the seat beside me. I was in the back seat. I took out the money. I was talking to the guy, paying him, and I must have had other items with me, but I got out of the cab, closed the door, and right as I closed the door, I realized that I had left the purse with all the money and with my plane ticket in the cab. And then it's pulling away. So I'm running and yelling and waving and hoping that maybe he'll look in his rearview mirror and notice me yelling and waving to stop. Obviously that didn't happen. So I watched him drive away knowing, and I mean, all my money, all my cash. There were no credit cards. Nobody dealt in credit cards back then. And that return plane ticket. The only upside, I guess, was that my passport wasn't in there as well because I'd already dropped it off at the Taiwan Embassy. Well, I do remember standing there watching him drive away and how stunned I was and realizing that as I was someone traveling alone. It was a short trip. It was just a visa run trip, but I wasn't leaving till Sunday. So I had no friends. Unlike my first visa run trip where I ran into a college friend in the airport and wound up traveling with her and hanging out with all these other people that I could have borrowed money from, that wasn't the case in this situation. So what do? I think I freaked out for a minute or two, probably hyperventilated. And then I realized I had to just calm down and get my shit together and figure it out because I had nobody but myself to depend on to solve this problem. So I went to the local neighborhood police station, and it took a while, not too long, to kind of work my way to somebody in there who could speak enough English. I don't speak Thai, I speak Mandarin, Chinese, to explain to him as simply as possible what had happened. Obviously, there isn't really a lot they can do. I mean, I can't tell them any real details about the taxi that I was in. And it's a city of millions and millions of people, and it's just super unfortunate. But yeah, there was nothing they could do. And basically the idea was, well, I guess you go to your embassy. So I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll get right on that. So they were nice enough at the police station to not loan, he just gave me enough money to pay for a cab ride from where I was to the embassy. So I took a cab there. I go there, there's the guards out front. I talk to them because I don't have an appointment. I have no real reason to be there other than my personal crisis, my personal emergency. So I talk to the guards and tell them, and they're like, oh, okay, well, we can get you on the phone. There's like a phone in their guard station that goes to the embassy inside where you can talk to a consular officer. So they let me go in there and sit on that phone. And I will never fucking forget this. The guy says, well, you sound like an American, but you could be Canadian. And he says that to me because I don't have a passport. My first thought was, if I were a Canadian, I'd be at the Canadian embassy, you dumbass. Like, what the fuck? It's like, yeah, because they're probably a lot nicer at the Canadian embassy than the American embassy, which is, I'm sure is true. So he tells me he can't let me inside the embassy to make a phone call to my family to have them wire me money in this emergency without my passport. So the only one tiny bit of good luck is the Taiwan embassy is on the same major road as the US embassy. It's like an embassy row in downtown Bangkok. I have to walk there, of course, but by then I was crying because I was really upset and I had to get my passport from them to take it to the US embassy so I could get into the US embassy so I could make that phone call that will hopefully save my ass. But then I would still have to get my passport back to the Taiwan embassy so I could get my visa stamp so I could go back to Taiwan to study. I said the whole story to the secretary at the Taiwan embassy. I'm crying while I'm telling her the story because now I'm really quite sad and frustrated. And she was very kind. She was handing me tissues and saying to me in Chinese, don't cry, don't cry. It's going to be okay. And she had to go back and talk to her people and pull my passport out of their processing office area, whatever, and hand it back to me. And obviously she told me, you have to get this back to us soon, as soon as possible, so that we can still process it before the end of the day on Friday, knowing that I was leaving Sunday. I took my passport, walked back to the US embassy, showed them my passport, showed them I wasn't Canadian. They allowed me a phone call. Of course, I think it had to be a collect phone call to my parents in the United States. At the time, it was, the middle of the day in Bangkok, and it's about a 12-hour difference. So it was about 3 or 4 in the morning in the United States. I called my parents. Fortunately, they answered. I had to explain to them as quickly and succinctly as possible what had happened. And of course, they're only half awake. So I had to tell them about the money and the passport and back and forth. So then my dad says, "Oh, don't worry. We'll send you the money. We can send, how much do you need?" I said, "Of $300 US, knowing that would more than cover it for these few days. And, "Oh, don't worry. We'll send it to you. As soon as we get up in the morning at 7 or 8 in the morning, we'll call Western Union because they're 24 hours. So I said to them, "No, I need you. The minute you get off the phone with me, you have to wake up. You have to get on the phone. You have to make sure this money is wired to me immediately because Western Union is not open 24 hours. It's going to close in a couple hours here in Bangkok." They're like, "Well, that doesn't make any..." I'm like, "Oh my God, don't argue with me." So I'm like, no one gives a shit that it's 24 hours. It's like, we are not in the US, we're in a different country. And they're like, okay, we'll do it, and hang up with them. And then I leave. I have to walk from the US Embassy to a shopping mall that has a Western Union. It's not even an office. It's somewhere inside this really big shopping mall that's about 1.5 miles away. So it takes me about 45 minutes to walk there, knowing that I'm under this time constraint, knowing that I'm not probably going to get back to the Taiwan embassy before they close. But I'm like, fuck it, that's the least of my problems. And I probably need my passport with me as an ID to get the money from Western Union. So I get there and I'm just like, where the fuck is the Western Union here? And I'm asking, it's so messed up because I ask people and they're like, "Oh, it's upstairs." I go upstairs, not a sign, nothing at all. I'm just in some shopping mall on the second floor where there's, women's and kids' clothes or something. It's so fucked up. So I go to a counter, what looks like a cash register checkout counter in the clothing area, and I ask them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're Western Union." So I'm like, "Really? Where's your fucking sign?" And they're like, "Oh, it's kind of, there's no sign." So good news that $300 US, which is a lot of money when you convert it to Thai baht currency, they actually give you all of that money in the local currency in a receipt. And I was like, okay, holy shit, I got money now. I'm so happy. So that day is done. There's no time to go back to the Taiwan embassy. So I have to go back there the following morning, which is Thursday. They took the passport and said they would get it processed quickly and I could pick it up the following day. Super nice, great people. Then I had to find Delta's office in the city to have my paper plane ticket replaced. So that cost some money that I wasn't really thinking of or expecting, but I still had plenty of money to pay for my hostel for the rest of my trip, to pay for food, etc. So I did all those things, and I even went ahead and bought a shuttle bus ticket from Khao Road to the airport for Sunday morning. I had a very early morning flight. It was a 9 a.m. flight. So I bought a 6 a.m. shuttle. So I would get there at about 6:30, knowing it's an international flight. You have to get there really early, blah, blah, blah. And then I went to sleep Saturday night, knowing I had to get up really early to catch the 6 a.m. shuttle. And basically all the money that I had left was for the airport tax that you have to pay when you're leaving. I had already paid for everything else, and I didn't want to have a lot of Thai baht left, so I had kind of spent it up, so to speak. So I set my alarm and go to sleep. I wake up and I look at my little digital clock that I brought with me, and it's 8:30 in the morning. And I remember looking at it I'm like, that can't, I actually, in my brain was like, that can't be right. That just can't be right. There's no way that can be right.
Hey, Josh here. I love making this podcast, and I'd love to make it my full-time gig. Besides telling the stories, I'm basically a one-man band, and that takes time. If you're enjoying the podcast, please consider becoming a patron. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that you're supporting a truly independent podcast. Find the Patreon link in the show notes. And thanks.
So I knew I had missed my flight, but I also knew the only money that I had and the only thing I had in my purse was that money for the airport tax and that ticket, that shuttle bus ticket. So knowing I was totally screwed, I went to the shuttle bus area where they pick you up. They wouldn't take my ticket because it was for a different time. So I was there begging other foreigners, other backpackers for a little bit of cash so that I could pay. And there were two people who were going to take a taxi, and they were like, well, the three of us could split it, but I didn't even have money. But yeah, somehow I got some money from these other travelers. A few of them took pity on me. Some of them were jerks. Some were like, it's your own fucking problem. Others gave me some money. And so the three of us went in a taxi to the airport. And so I go to the Delta counter, and it's now after 9 a.m. And it's dark. It's black. There's no lights on. There's nobody there. So I start asking various people at the airport, and they're like, yeah, you're right. Nobody's there right now. They had a flight this morning, but no one's there now. And they're like, you probably need to go to their office inside the airport, but that office is sort of in the bowels. It's in the basement. So someone takes me down there, and there's a woman in just a very small office in the basement of the airport. And I show her my ticket, and she's like, well, okay. And she looks at it and she's like, well, let me check. She's typing on her computer for when the next flight is. And she's like, yeah, the next flight's Tuesday. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, of course it is. It's like, I remember taking what change I had out of my pocket and into my hands and saying, it was like $2 maybe US, the equivalent thereof. I said, I don't even have enough money to eat a meal in this airport. I have no money to get back to Bangkok, to stay there for the next day or two so that I can come back here. Again, don't have money to do that either. So basically, I told her I would have to sleep on the floor of this airport for the next 2 nights, begging people in the airport for money so that I could eat. And she just looked at me, and because I didn't say it that calmly. So I actually leaned over and kind of got into her face and said, you don't understand. And then said all of that in kind of a very distressed and probably somewhat scary and intimidating voice and manner, enough that it kind of scared the crap out of her, I guess. And she just stared at me, and she said, well, I'll be back. But I thought, I'm not leaving this room until I get something sorted out, even though knowing that there's no fucking Delta flight. So I stand there waiting in this room. I don't know how much time goes by, maybe 10 or 15 minutes. And then she comes back and she says, okay, you're going to get on a flight today. And I'm like, I am? Really? She said, yeah, you're going to go on EVA, Evergreen Airlines, which is a Taiwan airline, a very nice, good airline. She's like, we're going to get you home. We're going to get you home. I was like, oh. So once again, so many helpful people. So she handed me this ticket, and she's like, whatever you do, don't lose it. Don't miss this flight. Make sure you get there. I was like, oh my God, thank you. I swear I could have jumped over the counter and hugged her, but she was probably kind of scared of me by then, seriously. So I go to the gate. I'm exhausted. I look like shit. And I'm a student, so I don't look like all these nice people who are sitting there waiting to get on this flight. but I do get on the flight, and I'm looking at the ticket, I'm looking at my seat number, and as I board, usually when you board, you go to the left, you're going to the back. And in this one, according to my seat number, I go to the right, toward the front of the airplane. I think that's strange. Turns out I'm flying first class. That was the only I'm like, holy shit. I was like, that was the only time I've ever flown first class. So yeah, I got a first class ticket. Again, I don't look good. I probably don't even smell good. And they're offering me champagne. And I'm kind of like, is it free? Not truly having no clue what flying, and the guy sitting next to me, it's great, everything's free, you're in first class. I'm like, oh, well, it was kind of a fluke that I wound up here in first class. But yes, I guess I should enjoy it.
I want to thank Valerie for sharing her experience. If you're in need of entertainment location services, check out Valerie's Atlanta-based company's ATL Locations and Pellicular Properties. This podcast was created and produced by me, Josh Caldwell. Music by Visual Aid, my side music project. General support and copywriting by Miranda Caldwell. If you like the show, please follow, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you'd like to financially support the show, check out my Patreon page. You'll have access to loads of great bonus stories. You can find the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and I hope you come back next week.